Good day everyone. My name is Giselle A. Añonuevo from 3 Math C. So today my report is about the meaning of test reliability and how to establish test reliability. So what is test reliability? Reliability is the consistency of the responses to measure under three conditions. First condition, when retested on the same person. Second, when retested on the same measure. Third, similarity of responses across items that measure the same characteristics. In the first condition, consistent response is expected when the test is given to the same participants. In the second, reliability is attained if responses to the same test is consistent with the same or its equivalent or another test that measures the same characteristic when administered at the different time. In the third condition, there is reliability when the person responded in the same way or consistently across items that measure the same characteristic. There are different factors that affect the reliability of a measure. The reliability of a measure can be high or low depending on the following factors. The first factor, the number of items in a test. The more items a test has, the likelihood of reliability is high. The probability of obtaining consistent scores is high because of the large pool of items. Second factors, individual differences of participants. Every participant possesses characteristics that affect their performance in a test, such as fatigue, concentration, innate ability, perseverance, and motivation. These individual factors change over time and affect the consistency of the answer in a test. Third factor is external environment. The external environment may include room temperature, noise level, depth of instruction, exposure to materials, and quality of instruction, which could affect changes in the responses of the examinees in a test. What are the different ways to establish test reliability? There are different ways in determining the reliability of the test. The specific kind of reliability will depend on the first variable you are measuring, second, type of a test, and third, number of versions of the test. The different types of reliability are indicated and how they are done. Notice in the third column that statistical analysis is needed to determine the test reliability. So the first column is method in testing reliability. Second column, how is this reliability done? And third column, what statistic is used? So first method, the test retest. You have a test and you need to administer it at one time to a group of examinees. Administer it again at another time to the same group of examinees. There is a time interval of not more than 6 months between the first second administration of tests that measure stable characteristics such as standardized aptitude tests. The post-test can be given with a minimum time interval of 30 minutes. The responses in the test should more or less be the same across the 2 points in time. Test retest is applicable for tests that measure stable variables, such as aptitude and psychomotor measure. Include po dito yung typing test, task in physical education. Correlate the test scores from the first and the next administration. Significant and positive correlation indicates that the test has temporal stability over time. Correlation refers to a statistical procedure where linear relationship is expected for two variables. You may use person product moment correlation, or person R because test data are usually in an interval scale, referred to as the statistic book for a person R. Second method, parallel form. There are two versions of the test. The items need to exactly measure the same skill. Each test version is called a form. administer one form at one time to the same group of participants. The responses of the two forms should be more or less the same. Parallel forms are applicable. If there are two versions of the test, this is usually done when the test is repeatedly used for different groups, such as entrance examination. Different versions of the test are given to a different group of examinees. Correlate the test results for the first form and the second form. Significant and positive correlation coefficients are expected. The significant and positive correlation indicates that responses in the two forms are the same or consistent person is usually used for this analysis. Third method is split half. Administer a test of a group of examinees. The items need to be split into halves, usually using the odd-even technique. Get the sum of the points of the even number items. Each examinee will have two scores coming from the same test. The scores on each set should be close or consistent. Split half is applicable when the test has a large number of items. Correlate the two sets of scores using person R. After the correlation, use another formula called Spearman-Brown coefficient. The correlation coefficient obtained using person R and Spearman-Brown should be significant and positive to mean that the test has internal consistency reliability. Fourth method, test of internal consistency using Coulter-Richardson and Kruba-Alpha method. The procedure involves determining if the scores for each item are consistently answered by the examinees. After administering the test of a group of examinees, it is necessary to determine and record the scores of each item. The idea here is to see if the responses per item are consistent with each other. This technique will work well when the assessment tool has a large number of items. It is also applicable for scales from strongly agree to strongly disagree. The statistical analysis called Kruba-Alpha or the Coulter-Richardson is used to determine the internal consistency of the items. A Kruba-Alpha value of 0.60 and above indicates that the test items have internal consistency. Fourth method, inter-rater reliability. This procedure is used to determine the consistency of multiple raters when using rating scales and rubrics to judge performance. The reliability here refers to the similar or consistent ratings provided by more than one rater or judge when they use an assessment tool. Inter-rater is applicable when the assessment requires the use of multiple raters. A statistical analysis called Kendall's tau coefficient of concordance used to determine if the ratings provided by multiple raters agree with each other. Significant Kendall's tau value indicates that the raters concur or agree with each other in the ratings. Linear regression. Linear regression is demonstrated when you have two variables that are measured, such as two sets of scores in a test taken at two different times by the same participants. When the two scores are plotted in a graph with x and y axes, they tend to form a straight line. The line formed for two sets of scores can produce a linear regression. When a straight line forms, we can say that there is a correlation between the two sets of scores. This correlation is shown in the graph given. The graph is called a scatter plot. Each point in the scatter plot is responded with two scores or one each test. Second, computation of person R correlation. The index of the linear regression is called correlation coefficient. When the points in the scatter plot tend to fall within the linear line, the correlation is said to be strong. When the direction of all scatter plot is directly proportional, the correlation coefficient will have a negative value. The statistical analysis used to determine the correlation coefficient is called the person R. How the person R is obtained is illustrated below. Suppose that a teacher gave the spelling of two syllable words with 20 items for Monday and Tuesday. The teacher wanted to determine the reliability of two sets of scores by computing for the personal formula. So, ito po yung formula of correlation coefficient. So, X po, ang X po by Monday test and Y the Tuesday test. And then, yan po yung mga scores and hanggang sa pababa po. X and Y, X squared, Y squared, and XY. Sa X squared po, kapag square the value of the X scores. And Y squared, square the value of the Y scores by Tuesday score. Tapos, ang XY po, multiply the X and Y scores. The sigma X squared, add all the squared value of X, and sigma Y squared, add all the squared values of Y. Sigma XY, add all the product of X and Y. So, ito po yung procedure, ay formula. Tapos, i-substitute po natin. Yan po. Yan po magiging result. Big shortcut na po, kaya ang correlation coefficient po is 0.80. The value of correlation coefficient does not exceed 1 or negative 1. A value of 1 and negative 1 indicates perfect correlation. In terms of reliability, though, we aim for high positive correlation to mean that there is consistency in the way the student answered the test taken. Number 3, difference between a positive and a negative correlation. When the value of the correlation coefficient is positive, it means that the higher the score in X, the higher the scores in Y. This is called a positive correlation. In the case of the two spelling scores, a positive correlation obtained. When the value of correlation coefficient is negative, it means the higher the scores in X, the lower the scores in Y, and vice versa. This is called a negative correlation. When the same test is administered to the same group of participants, usually a positive correlation indicates reliability or consistency of the scores. Determining the strength of correlation. The strength of the correlation also indicates the strength of the reliability of the test. This is indicated by the value of the correlation coefficient. The closer the value to 1 or negative 1, the stronger is the correlation. Below is the guide. Yung 0.80 hanggang 1, very strong relationship. Ang 0.6 hanggang 0.79, strong relationship. 0.40 to 0.59, substantial mark relationship. 0.2 until 0.39, weak relationship. 0 until 0.19, negligible relationship. 5. Determining the significance of the correlation. The correlation obtained between two variables could be due to chance in order to determine if the correlation is free of certain errors. It is tested for significance. When the correlation is significant, it means that the probability of the two variables being related is free of certain errors. In order to determine if a correlation coefficient value is significant, it is compared with an expected probability of correlation coefficient value called a critical value when the value computed is greater than the critical value. It means that the information obtained has more than 95% chance of being correlated and insignificant. Another statistical analysis mentioned to determine the internal consistency of a test is the Kruba alpha. Follow the procedure to determine the internal consistency. Suppose that 5 students answer a checklist about their hygiene with a scale of 1 to 5, wherein the following are the corresponding score. And 5 always, 4 often, 3 sometimes, 2 rarely, 1 never. So ito po, yung student, may student A, B, C, D, E. Item 1, so A po nakakuha ng 5, and so on, hanggang po sa naging item 5. Ang total for age case X. So, ang item 1, 2, 3, 4, ni A, total 19. Tapos po, yung A, B, yung total po ng student B sa item 1 hanggang 5 is 15. Sa letter C, sa student C naman po, yung item 1 to 5, 16 yung score niya, yung total po. Hanggang sa letter D and E. Tapos po, yung total for each case of X, so 19 hanggang 18 po, 19 plus 15, 16, 13, 18. Equivalent po yan sa 81. Tig-divide po siya, kaya nakakuha po ng 16.2. Yan po ang ano niya. Tapos, score of B and 2. Ang ito po yung 7.84, tig square root of, tig 2.8 po, tig multiply by 2.8, yung square niya po. Kaya nakakuha po ng 7.84. Tig add po yung 784, 1.844, and so on. Kaya po ang sigma score of B and square is 22.8. Total for each item. So, nakita nyo na po yung kanina. Ito po, yung total po nila. Next naman po tayo sa total for each. Yung Kruba A. Ang N. So, nakita nyo naman po yung sa taas. Yung kanina po yung total case of each ng X is 16.2. Ito po yung formula ng another ano po. Score of minus B yan squared equals 22.8 over 5 minus 1 equals 5.7. Sa Kruba A, isusubstitute po yung number. The internal consistency of the responses in the attitude toward teaching is 0.10, indicating low internal consistency. The consistency of ratings can also be obtained using a coefficient of concordance. The Kendall's W coefficient of concordance is used to test the agreement among raters. Below is a performance task demonstrated by 5 students rated by 3 raters. The rubric uses a scale of 1 to 4, wherein 4 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. So, nakikita nyo naman po yung table. Yung sum of ratings, total lang po yung 11, 8, 11, 11, 8, 4. Yan po yung formula niya. Substitute lang po. Kinuha lang po dito sa table. So, the scores given by the 3 raters are first computed by summing up the total ratings for each demonstration. The mean is obtained for the sum of ratings. Yung ratings po is 8.4. The mean is subtracted from each of the sum of ratings. each difference is squared, d squared, then the sum of the squares is computed, sigma d squared equal 33.2. The mean and summation of square difference is substituted in the Kendall's W formula. In the formula, M is the numbers operator. So, ito po yung Kendall's W formula. Ang raters po is 0.37. So, nagets po. Basta po, ito po yung formula ng Kendall's. And then, substitute lang po yung nasa table para makuha po yung 0.37. That's all po. Thank you.